It was a Tuesday night when everything changed between me and Alex, my neighbor of 3 years. You know those neighbors you wave to, occasionally borrow sugar from, but never really know? That was Alex. Straight as an arrow. At least that's what I'd always assumed from the parade of girlfriends I'd seen coming and going from his apartment across the hall. We'd exchanged pleasantries, helped each other with packages, and once I even watered his plants when he went to visit his parents in Ohio. But we weren't friends, not really. Just two people who happened to share a wall and occasionally an elevator ride. That Tuesday, I was struggling with my grocery bags, trying to fish my keys out of my pocket without dropping the carton of eggs I'd just spent too much money on. Alex's door opened just as I was performing this delicate balancing act, and there he stood, in sweatpants and a faded college t-shirt, looking like he hadn't slept well in days. "Need a hand?" he asked, already reaching for one of my bags before I could answer. That's the kind of neighbor he was, helpful but never intrusive. I handed him the heaviest bag gratefully and finally managed to unlock my door. "Rough day," I ventured as he followed me into my apartment and set the groceries on my kitchen counter. It wasn't like me to pry, but the dark circles under his eyes told a story I found myself curious about. Alex ran a hand through his disheveled hair and sighed. "You could say that. Just got laid off. Budget cuts." He shrugged like it was no big deal, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. I knew how precarious employment could be, especially in our city where the cost of living kept climbing while salaries remained stagnant. That's really tough. There was an awkward pause as I started unpacking my groceries, unsure if I should offer more sympathy or give him space. Then Alex said something that would change the course of our evening, and possibly more. I could use a drink, to be honest. Just one. He looked at me with a half-smile that seemed both hopeful and hesitant. "Want to join me? There's this bar around the corner I've been meaning to try." Now, I should mention that I had plans that night. Plans that involved my couch, a pint of ice cream, and the latest season of whatever show I was binging at the time. But something in Alex's expression made me pause. It wasn't just about the drink. It was about not wanting to be alone with his thoughts on what was clearly one of his worst days. "Sure," I heard myself say. "Just let me put these groceries away and change. One drink couldn't hurt, right?" If only I'd known how those words would echo in my mind hours later. The bar Alex had suggested was called the Rusty Nail, a name that conjured images of tetanus shots rather than a pleasant evening out. But when we arrived, I was pleasantly surprised. It was cozy without being cramped, dimly lit without being dark, and the soft jazz playing in the background created an atmosphere that invited conversation without demanding it. We found a small booth in the corner, and Alex insisted on buying the first round. "It's the least I can do after you agreed to come out on a weeknight," he said, sliding onto the bench across from me. I noticed he'd changed too, dark jeans and a button-up shirt that brought out the blue in his eyes. I'd never really looked at his eyes before. He returned with our drinks, a craft beer for him and a gin and tonic for me, remembering my preference from a casual conversation we'd had months ago when we bumped into each other at the local liquor store. I was touched by this small detail, this evidence that our passing interactions had registered with him. "So," I said, taking a sip of my drink, "want to talk about it? The job situation, I mean." Alex shrugged, tracing a pattern in the condensation on his glass. "Not much to tell. Company's downsizing, and my department got hit hard. I've been there 3 years, but apparently that doesn't count for much these days." I nodded sympathetically. 3 years is a long time. "Do you have any leads on what's next?" "A few," he said, but his tone suggested these leads were more wishful thinking than concrete opportunities. "I've got some savings, so I'm not panicking yet. Just disappointed. I like that job." We fell into easy conversation after that, moving from his job prospects to my work frustrations, from there to movies we'd both seen recently, and then to childhood memories triggered by songs that played in the background. It was surprising how much we had in common despite having lived parallel lives just feet apart for years. One drink turned into two as the conversation flowed more freely. I learned that Alex had moved to the city after a bad breakup, seeking a fresh start. He'd grown up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, and the anonymity of urban life had been both a relief and a challenge. "Sometimes I miss knowing my neighbors," he admitted, finishing his second beer. "Back home, we all looked out for each other. Here, it took me 3 years to have a real conversation with the person who lives across the hall." He smiled at me, and I felt a warmth that wasn't entirely due to the gin. Well, better late than never, I replied, raising my glass in a small toast. As we ordered our third round, so much for one drink, I found myself studying Alex in a way I never had before. The way his hands gestured when he talked about something he was passionate about. The crinkles at the corners of his eyes when he laughed. The slight stubble on his jaw that caught the light when he turned his head. It was during this third drink that our knees touched under the table. Neither of us moved away. It was a small point of contact, innocent enough, but it sent a current through me that I hadn't expected. I wondered if he felt it too. The conversation deepened as the night progressed. We shared stories about our families, our hopes, our disappointments. Alex told me about his dream of opening his own architecture firm someday, sketching out his vision on a cocktail napkin with surprising detail. I confessed my fear that I was settling in my career, playing it safe instead of pursuing what really excited me. "What does excite you?" he asked, leaning forward slightly, genuinely interested in my answer. It was a simple question, but it caught me off guard. When was the last time someone had asked me that? When was the last time I'd asked myself? "I've always wanted to write," I admitted, feeling vulnerable in the confession. "Not just the copy I churn out for work, but something real, something that matters." "So why don't you?" His question wasn't challenging. It was curious, encouraging even. I laughed softly. The usual excuses. Not enough time. Not enough talent. Bills to pay. Alex nodded thoughtfully. "I get that. But maybe losing my job is a sign that playing it safe isn't actually that safe after all. Maybe we both need to take more chances." There was something in the way he said, "we," that made my heart beat a little faster. Were we still talking about careers, or had the conversation shifted to something else entirely? It was around this time that I noticed the bar had grown quieter. Many of the tables that had been full when we arrived were now empty. I glanced at my watch and was shocked to see it was nearly midnight. "We'd been talking for hours. I can't believe how late it is," I said, feeling a mix of surprise and reluctance. Part of me wanted to suggest we call it a night. I had work in the morning, after all. But a stronger part wanted to stay right where I was, in this bubble we'd created where Alex wasn't just my neighbor, but someone I was genuinely connecting with. Before I could say anything else, the bartender's voice rang out. "Last call, folks." Alex and I looked at each other, both seemingly startled by the announcement. Last call? How had the time passed so quickly? "One more?" Alex asked, a hopeful note in his voice that suggested he wasn't ready for the evening to end either. I hesitated only briefly before nodding. "One more," I agreed, even as I calculated how few hours of sleep I'd get before my alarm went off. As Alex went to the bar for our final round, I found myself watching him. The way he moved with a casual confidence, the way he smiled at the bartender, the way he glanced back at me as if to make sure I was still there. It struck me then that I was attracted to him. Not just physically, though there was certainly that, but to his mind, his humor, his kindness. When had that happened? Had it been building all along, through those brief encounters in our hallway? Or was it new, born tonight in this dimly lit bar? He returned with our drinks, whiskey this time, his suggestion for a nightcap, and slid back into the booth. Our knees touched again, and this time I was certain the contact was intentional on both our parts. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. "And to neighbors who become friends." Friends? Was that what we were becoming? It felt like more than that, but I clinked my glass against his anyway. "To new beginnings," I echoed. The whiskey burned pleasantly as I sipped it, adding to the warmth I already felt. We talked more, but there was a different quality to our conversation now, an awareness of something shifting between us. Our words were punctuated by longer glances, by smiles that lingered, by an electricity that hadn't been there at the start of the evening. As we finished our drinks, the bar staff began the unmistakable rituals of closing, wiping down surfaces, stacking chairs, pointedly checking watches. Our time in this neutral space was coming to an end, and soon we'd have to return to being just neighbors again. Or would we? "I don't want this night to end," Alex said suddenly, his voice low enough that I had to lean in to hear him. "I know that sounds, I don't know, presumptuous maybe, but I've really enjoyed talking with you." My heart raced as I considered my response. The sensible part of me knew I should thank him for the evening and suggest we do it again sometime. The less sensible part, the part warmed by alcohol and attraction, had other ideas. "My place is closer," I heard myself say. I have a decent bottle of wine we could open. The moment the words left my mouth, I felt a flutter of panic. Was I misreading the situation? What if he just meant he was enjoying the conversation in a purely platonic way? But the look in Alex's eyes told me I hadn't misunderstood at all. "I'd like that," he said, his voice a touch huskier than before. We settled the bill, splitting it despite his protests, and stepped out into the cool night air. The walk back to our building was short, but it felt significant, like crossing a threshold. We didn't talk much, both perhaps afraid to break whatever spell had been cast over the evening. In the elevator, standing closer than neighbors usually would, I could smell his cologne, something woody and subtle that I'd never noticed before. Our hands brushed as we both reached to press the button for our floor, and the brief contact sent another jolt through me. At my door, I fumbled with my keys, suddenly nervous in a way I hadn't been all evening. This was my neighbor. If things went badly, I'd still have to see him every day. Was I making a mistake? But when I finally got the door open and turned to invite him in, the look on Alex's face dispelled my doubts. There was desire there, yes, but also a tenderness that caught me off guard. Inside my apartment, the atmosphere changed again. This was my space, intimate in a way the bar hadn't been. I busied myself with opening the wine, grateful for something to do with my hands. "Nice place," Alex said, looking around with genuine interest. "I've always wondered what these apartments look like from the other side." I laughed, some of my nervousness dissipating. "Probably a mirror image of yours, just with different furniture. And fewer architectural drawings taped to every surface," he added with a self-deprecating smile. I handed him a glass of wine and gestured toward my couch. "Make yourself comfortable." He sat, and after a moment's hesitation, I sat beside him, not too close, but not at the opposite end either. We sipped our wine in silence for a moment, and I wondered if the easy conversation we'd enjoyed at the bar had abandoned us now that we were alone. But then Alex spoke, his voice soft but steady. "I've lived across from you for 3 years, and tonight is the first time I feel like I've really seen you." The simple honesty of his statement touched me deeply. "I know what you mean," I replied. "It's strange how we can be so close to people physically but never really connect." "Until now," he said, and there was a question in his eyes as he looked at me. I set my wine glass down on the coffee table, my decision made. "Until now," I agreed, and leaned toward him. The first kiss was tentative, a gentle exploration. But it quickly deepened as 3 years of being strangers and one night of becoming something more converged in this moment. His hand came up to cup my face, and I moved closer, all thoughts of propriety or consequences forgotten in the heat of connection. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Alex rested his forehead against mine. "I've been wanting to do that since you helped me carry that ridiculously large bookshelf up the stairs last summer," he confessed. I laughed, surprised. "Really? I had no idea." "I'm good at hiding it," he said with a small smile. Or I was, until tonight. We talked more as we finished our wine, but the conversation was different now, interspersed with touches, with kisses, with admissions of attraction that had been suppressed for longer than either of us had realized. The night stretched on as one glass of wine turned into sharing the rest of the bottle, as sitting side by side turned into my head on his chest, his arm around my shoulders. It was nearly dawn when exhaustion finally overtook us. We hadn't gone further than kissing and holding each other, both silently acknowledging that whatever was happening between us deserved time to unfold properly, not rushed in the heat of one unexpected night. "I should go," Alex said reluctantly as the first light of morning began to filter through my curtains. "We both need some sleep." I nodded, though part of me wanted to ask him to stay. "This isn't just because of the job thing, right?" I asked, voicing a concern that had been nagging at me. "You're not just looking for a distraction?" Alex took my hand, his expression serious. "This has nothing to do with losing my job and everything to do with finally seeing what's been right in front of me for years. I'd have asked you out for that drink eventually, job or no job." I believed him. There was a sincerity in his eyes that couldn't be faked, especially not after the hours of conversation we'd shared. At my door, he kissed me once more, a promise rather than a goodbye. "Dinner tonight?" he asked. "My place this time. I make a mean lasagna." I smiled, already looking forward to it. "It's a date." As I watched him walk the few steps to his own apartment, I marveled at how much had changed in the space of one night. What had started as one drink with a neighbor I barely knew had ended with the possibility of something I hadn't even known I was looking for. Sometimes the most unexpected connections are found in the most familiar places. And sometimes, one drink is all it takes to change everything. Total _char_count, 17,902.